welcome to Snetterton. This is my first ever time here as a racer. I've been here a few times as a fan. I think I watched British GT here last year. I did some media stuff towards the start of this year as well as some stuff before that, but it's not exactly a close circuit for us. About I think 3 hours it took on the trailer this morning, but luckily our event isn't until a bit later on. So after last week, unfortunately the Honda isn't in a place that we can race it, but luckily I was already borrowing the Ford KA from Tim at Turn 38 Motorsport, so we've got that to give it a go here at Snetterton. Now I realise I'm probably not going to be racing against many people here, but you know, it's what the circumstance is, and I'll just see what happens. Fingers crossed, just have a good time. That's all I can really do here. I'm not going to really have a chance to race against too many people here today, so get out there, enjoy the circuit, and just have a good day. Really, that's the main thing to do. So an update on the Honda, we've had a look over it ourselves. A few body panels obviously we want to replace just to make them look nicer, and I think the lower wishbone I think is what we think has took the brunt of the impact as well as the wheel. So it is what it is. We'll get that fixed. We're hoping by sort of middle of September, maybe more likely towards the end of October. Not just because it's going to take that long, but just because I don't have the time really off work to be doing extra stuff. So we've got a few weekends in the Ford KA here in the Tin Top series with the Classic Sports Car Club. I've raced with them once before. That was last year, Thruxton with Sam. So it was a really enjoyable club to be a part of, and can't wait to see how the day goes here. And thankfully, looking up there, I mean, there's a few clouds up there, but it's a nice sunny day so far. I mean, that's going to jinx it, isn't it? Touch wood, that's not the case. But yeah, we'll get out there for qualifying and just see what the KA does. Haven't driven it in a while. Well, I say that, about 3 weeks probably. So just got to get back into the groove with that. Obviously, it's very different to the Honda. And yes, we'll just see how it goes. Looking forward to it though. As I say, newer track for me, so just go out there and enjoy, Alex. No expectations here. So some slightly strange circumstances going into this weekend with the CSCC, my second time ever with them, first of which was last year at Thruxton when racing with Sam, my first event of the year last year, and the first ever Motorsport Uncut video. Regardless, a massive thank you to everyone at the KMC Kettering Motorist Centre, Tim, Rich, everyone there. Massive help to me over the last few months. Of course, this is slightly recorded after the event, but regardless, they've helped me out a lot and allowed me to drive the KA after the incident at Silverstone was a massive thing for me to get some confidence back and just get out there and drive around, have some fun, get back into the groove after what was of course a tough few days. Thankfully I had all got this pre-arranged before the event, but using the KA probably wasn't what I was expecting. But regardless, the Tin Top series within the CSCC is a really fantastic portion of the club. The whole club in general was, I've got to say, quite fantastic, really great grids all round, but this grid I think was nearly 40 cars. Now a slight worry once going to the assembly area, the scrutineer was checking around the car and the last thing to show him was that the external cut-off switch was working. Now you can see here I'm putting a decent amount of force in there to try and get it working, but it didn't seem to want to nudge, and of course you don't want to absolutely yank it because then you risk breaking it. What it was though was that the internal cut-off switch for the electronics was actually just pushed too far to the right. You can see there by my hand the switch nearly down at 90 degrees there, but if I just switched up a little bit more, which I'd focus on and understand after qualifying, then it would be easily pulled from the outside. So just a few degrees in it meant that you could pull the external cut-off switch and you were completely fine. But that was a slight worry, I can't lie, going into the assembly area. Luckily the scrutineers were great with me there and we got through there all fine. But yeah, definitely a slightly heart-stopping moment. I was thinking, oh no, I'm not going to be able to get on track again, am I? Oh, something's gone wrong. I was really worried, but thankfully it wasn't the case. We head out onto the Snetterton track for the first ever time. The Snetterton 300 circuit is one of the longest in the UK and has some big straights, so far from ideal for the little KA with its standard 1300cc engine. I think 65 horsepower is probably about what it's pushing out, so in terms of lap time per horsepower, I probably wasn't doing too badly, but that's not how motorsport works. And of course I was expecting to be racing around by myself. If anything, as weird as it sounds to say it, it kind of probably did me some good for that to be the case. Get some more track experience, go through the emotions of a race weekend, and hopefully get through it with no problem. As always, a massive thank you to John and my dad for coming to the event. It's definitely what I needed the weekend after, to spend some more time with them. John was doing a great job around the track doing all this filming, and my dad was doing a sterling job in the paddock. We're actually in the outer paddock with this on the car. Thankfully the Ford Ka has been super reliable for us. There's only been a couple of little things that we wanted to do to it in our ownership, I'd like to say, of it. We're only basically borrowing it from the KMC, but still, in our acquisition we've only had to change a couple of little things, and I think that's just a testament to how they've built it, but then also how the car is as standard. Of course, it's meant to be a road car, not many modifications have been made, so you'd hope it would be quite reliable. So the format of this: 30 minutes of qualifying. Wow, that's a lot. Much more than I normally get, twice as much as I normally get. And then a 40-minute race, all for more or less the same entry fee. So quite a good deal there. You can share that between two drivers. That Civic, I didn't quite realise it at the time, that nearly hit me. Blimey, that was close. But we're basically just doing a quick roll through the pit lane to check a few things. The pit lane speed limits, and also how long it would take to go from one end to the pit lane to the other. So there's a 2-minute stop in the CSCC. You have to stop start to end of the pit lane of 2 minutes. The actual stop will be around, say, 1 minute 45, and obviously you're spending about 15 seconds going down the pit lane at the speed limit. It might be a little bit more, a little bit less. I was playing it on the cautious side, of course. I didn't need to be pushing it to the limit. I was in a class of myself. I was going around by myself, except for when I was getting lapped, which was quite soon, and generally just trying to get some confidence. So I wasn't needing to be super serious. But one thing I can say from this qualifying session is I was actually really struggling to get used to the Snetterton track. I've driven it some amount in games, not that frequently, I can't lie. It's definitely not near the top of my list in terms of tracks I will voluntarily go and drive on. But I understood the layout, I knew where the corners were, and I'd been there enough as a fan to know where all the corners go, what the angle of the corners were, and what I was going to be expecting next. But I can't lie, in the KA I didn't find it to be the most entertaining track. Now that's strange, I know, because I've spoke to people that have raced this car around the shorter Snetterton layout, the 200 layout, and they absolutely love it. They actually say it's their favourite layout, favourite track they go to. So I didn't know what it was. I thought the inner bit here that we're going through now would actually be better for the KA, because you wouldn't be quite as engulfed by the opposition, but I was just struggling. I wasn't really gelling with it for whatever reason, I don't know. But I think maybe in the back of my mind the big thing was just recovering from what was a very tough week in the back of my mind. So that was partly on my mind, and why I reflect on this weekend slightly negatively in comparison to a lot of the other times I've been out on track this year. I mean, a lot of the times I have been racing around by myself, which is fair enough, but for whatever reason this weekend I was just struggling to gel with the track. But I think that was more mentally rather than just physically enjoying the track. It is a good track. It's in some ways similar to Silverstone in terms of it's very flat. It's got some quick corners in there, but a few technical sections as well. So there are similarities to the Silverstone International layout that we were actually racing on the weekend prior, but it's very different to what I'd last driven the K at, which was Cadwell Park and Castle Combe, the track I've driven the most, and also Brands Hatch, another track that I've driven a decent amount in my time in race cars. So for whatever reason I was struggling, missing a load of braking points, missing in turning points like you saw there, just completely the wrong line through these corners. And as weird as it sounds to say it, I just don't think my mind was 100% clear going into these sessions. I think there was still a lot in there, a lot of worries and nerves just from the weekend prior, and just generally I think the build-up of emotion over the last week at this time was maybe becoming a bit too much. I wasn't being able to fully focus on what I was out there to do, which was try and drive as quickly as possible in this little Ford K8. Regardless, what you've seen there is my best lap. It's nothing special whatsoever. This was, I think, a 2:52, which, okay, in any other car, except maybe a Citroen C1 or a Citroen 2CV, you'd say is absolutely embarrassing. But around here, I mean, it didn't feel too bad at the time. I'll later find out that it isn't very good whatsoever, but regardless, I'd got through the qualifying session. We'd had a lot of track time. I was actually getting quite low on fuel from what I remember at this point here. Thankfully the KA uses hardly any fuel thanks to its tiny little engine, but still I think we were getting quite close there. So I'd roll into the outer paddock because everywhere else was full or blocked in, so I couldn't get out into where I was supposed to be. But regardless, we found our little spot out here, and it was a nice place just to be by ourselves and work on the car. So here are my thoughts after qualifying, which at the time I didn't realise was not especially a great time. So that is qualifying done here at Snetterton. We've got some racing actually going on right now, so that's quite cool to go and look at because of the way that the weekend goes. There's one qualifying session for everyone, then one long race, except from the Magnificent Seven sort of Caterham style cars. They have two. But that means that the sessions are quite spread out, so we have quite a bit of downtime here just to get used to it. But in terms of the qualifying session, I didn't set myself any expectations. Obviously, trying to build up confidence, that was a big thing, because you know, unfortunately the incident with the Civic last week meant that obviously I lost a bit of confidence there. So main thing was to get out there, get some confidence. Obviously I'm just moving out of the way of people really, just trying to enjoy myself, but obviously not hamper other people's racing. This was just the way that the calendar worked out, that this was an event that we could have done. But here we are. It's good to still have that experience. I feel like every single race weekend we do, we're finding little bits of things about the car or myself that are just helping us going forward. Now, ultimately that might not be better speed for myself, I might not be getting quicker, but I feel like the overall experience is becoming more enjoyable, and I feel like, I don't know what the right word is, fluid, a bit more productive. We're getting things done a bit quicker and just generally doing things a bit better. So we're just learning from that, as well as the obviously racing on track, where of course I've taken a bit of a blow in terms of confidence, so it was important to rebuild there. I mean, I'm the only person in my class, it's the bottom class, so I didn't expect to be beating anyone, but yeah, main thing was to get through the session. We sorted out the electric external cut-off switch, so that's all sorted, which is good. The scrutineers are happy with that. So yes, we just got to wait, and actually now quite a long time till our race. I think our quali was at about 11ish. Yeah, it was about 11ish, just after 11, and our race is just before 4 p.m. I think, 3:50. So we've got a long time to sort of have downtime here, but of course just try and prep myself, make sure the cameras and all the stuff are sorted, and then also just make sure I feel comfortable and just prepare myself for the race as best as possible. I think I'm going to go and watch some racing. There's a Slick series out there right now. You might be able to hear that commentary, tannoy, probably quite loud. Anyway, let's move on, let's get to the race and just main goal, have fun, Alex. I'm not sure if it's just me, but I think the K actually looks really cool out on track. It's very unique in this series because they don't typically see cars this slow, but I think as a car it actually doesn't look too bad whatsoever. I mean, it would look nicer without the duct tape on one of the front arches, but that was just a safety precaution to make sure that it didn't flap about and would get called in. But I think it looks pretty cool, to be perfectly honest. I mean, if you put it into perspective, it's a slow car out there on track, but I think it looks quite cool. I mean, it certainly looks nicer than some race cars I've seen out there, some more modern race cars. I think this does have some character in a weird way, but regardless, after getting the chance to watch some of the other series out on track, we'd roll into the assembly area and head out on track for our one race of the weekend. So typically we have two in all the other series I normally do, except from Castle Combe from time to time. And yeah, I was sort of relaxing as I went out here, but I didn't quite realise that we weren't going to stop on the grid. We were going to just go straight in to our formation lap and then on to the rolling start. So I was a little bit slow coming out the assembly area, lost myself a few seconds to the car in front, which for me in this car on a formation lap I certainly needed. If you've seen my Cadwell video, you'll know exactly what I mean. Thankfully we just about managed to catch up to the group by the end of the formation lap, which meant that we could take the rolling start. But maybe because of what happened the week prior, in the back of my head I was like, okay, I'm just going to give myself some extra car lengths anyway. I don't need to be up behind these guys. I'm significantly slower. It's exactly what I expected. And you know, once I got out of the final corner, more or less just floor it and take the start. You can see I'm not that far behind the cars in front. I gave myself maybe 4 or 5 car lengths, but as soon as the lights went out, of course they're flying off. Everyone else in this field has, I'd say, at least 3 times the horsepower. But as we go up to turn 1 here, always a pinch point, and it was the case once again. There was a little bit of contact in front of me. As we swing around this corner here, you'll see a car in the middle of the track. Unfortunately, it's slightly blocked by my numbers here, but sad to see a red Civic slightly destroyed in the middle of the track. Now, I thought that we were going to see a safety car straight away, but you see the green flags are out, and I think because of the fact it's such a long circuit, the 300 circuit as I mentioned, one of the longest in the UK, I think only possibly behind the Silverstone GP layout. But because it's such a long lap, we actually managed to, I think, avoid safety car in the early stages, which was good. Of course, nobody wants to just sit behind the safety car. Maybe it would have done my nerves some good to sit behind the safety car for a few laps, but regardless, it was all just down to me at this point, trying to set some decent lap times, have some fun, and just generally make sure I bring the car home. That was the big thing at this point, because I realised I was going to get lapped, and you can see here I'm trying my best to just indicate out the way. I think that's Manoj Patel in his Honda Civic. I think he was also racing in the New Millenniums on this weekend as well, and I think I'd pulled to the right hand side to the final corner to make sure that I'd let some of the faster cars through, and I managed to clip the apex here and then get the run. And you see in my mirrors, just of course people are flying up behind me. And my plan with Dad for this race was, as soon as the pit lane window opened at 10 minutes, I would come in, because the idea in my head was people are going to be closer at this stage of the race. 10 minutes in, the pack's still going to be quite closely confined, so if I pit in early, I'm going to try my best to get out their way and make sure that I don't get involved when they come in to do their pit stop stuff. So here we are rolling across the line here, and you saw maybe just right before the place where the checker flag will be waved, my dad holding out the pit board, so I'd be coming in to the pits at the end of this lap to serve our 2-minute pit stop. So nothing too special here. I was just trying my best, as always, to keep out of people's way. I did install a rear view camera this weekend to get some action of cars lapping me. I knew it was going to be a prime position, lots of action was going to be happening, cars going to be overtaking me left, right and centre. So this lap decided to come into the pit lane, make sure I got that out of the way. You don't really need to do anything special. I think there are winners penalties for the faster people. I think possibly top 3 overall, if I remember correctly. But in our class, it wasn't going to be a problem. We weren't going to need any pit stop penalties. Well, I hope they're not going to implement them if we do any more CSCC events, because who knows, I might have a challenger at some point if we do more. But yes, that was time to come into the pits. You can see I was just doing my best to just get out of people's way. I know I'm going to keep mentioning it throughout this video, but that was sort of the key thing for me here, because I just didn't want to ruin other people's races, because especially early on, people were still quite close. I mean, even though there are a number of classes, I think the Tin Tops has something between like 5 or 6 classes. Of course, we're the bottom one. I guess there's an invitation class as well. So yeah, there's a big variety, big grid, and just trying to stay out of people's way was a big thing. And you can see here, severely compromising my line through the last corner, but I was doing it so I let a few people through on the inside, so I felt fine about that. So rolling into the pits here, hitting the speed limit. I was being a little bit cautious as well as I'd roll down the pit lane here, just to make sure that we wouldn't get any penalties for speeding in the pit lane and so on. You can see one car so far has taken up the opportunity to come in and serve his pit stop as well. I decided to go wherever it was quietest in the pit lane, where my dad was standing, and he found that to be the end of the pit lane for this one. So I was just chatting with him here, saying everything's all fine, car feels good, and after 2 minutes or so we left it a little bit extra once again just to be safe. I'd roll out the end of the pit lane to resume my race with about 27 or so minutes to go as I exited the pit lane here. So just go out there, enjoy it, try and beat my lap time from quali. They were my only main aims, except from finishing the race, which of course is the main one. And of course I expected it, but I was spending a lot of my time in this race looking in my mirrors and staying out of people's way, which isn't really ideal. It's quite mentally taxing in itself doing that, because you're just so worried about getting out of people's way, or just making sure you don't get involved with an incident with them trying to lap you in a dodgy place. That, yeah, it's quite a tough one, and it's not exactly ideal. I mean, I wouldn't typically take the Ford Ka to big events like this where there are lots of cars, but it was just the situation that was dealt me, of course, and it wasn't really planned at the start of the season for it to be the case. The idea was to be using this, of course, in the Enduro car series, which we were still hoping to do at the end of the year, but unfortunately those plans didn't quite all come together. So we just ended up doing a few events in this one, and to be perfectly honest, I still really enjoyed it. But of course, when you're up against a big field, a busy field, it's quite a tough one. You look in your mirrors a lot. I'd say if the grid size was about 20, then it wouldn't really matter so much, because of course there aren't so many cars to come past you. But when it was this busy, I can't lie, it was quite a tough one. I was struggling a little bit in the race there, just to keep my head, because there was just so much going on and so much to focus on. My thoughts on Snetterton didn't really change after qualifying. I still wasn't finding it the easiest track in the world to gel with. It was just a weird one. I had no idea why, whether it's the conditions, just my head most likely, or a magnitude of just little things happening. But just for whatever reason I wasn't especially enjoying the track, which I know sounds really terrible, because it's obviously a dream to get out there and go racing, but I found it really tough this weekend, and actually only this weekend throughout the whole season, to just enjoy it. I guess it was the build-up of emotions in my head from the week prior that was just sort of coming down on me throughout the race, but it was a weird one, really just a very, very odd one, and I hope that it never happens again, because you don't want to replicate having a tough weekend in terms of just not thoroughly enjoying it. There were still moments of enjoyment, don't get me wrong here, but I guess just the worry and the constant lappery and so on was just possibly getting on my head, and it allowed me to not quite enjoy it as much as I wanted. So overall, I think it's still really important for me that I did this weekend. It allowed me to get back out on track and put some laps in, new car, new track, just get some more experience in the tank. But it was just a bit of a shame. Just at that moment, I didn't feel especially like I was enjoying it as much as I should do, which I know sounds really bad, but I'd like to be brutally honest in this one. This was I guess the one time this year where I wasn't really enjoying it as much. It's the way it is. Motorsport is cruel sometimes, and I guess that's just the way it was repaying me this weekend. So I think what I'm going to show you here is my best lap. It's kind of hard to tell because I don't have one of those timers that sort of inbuilds itself into the video footage, so I've got to take my best guess from all the data I do have to what my best lap was. So unlike qualifying, I was having to get out of people's way much more frequently on the racing. So you can see here I was saying sorry there, because I think I probably held him up a tad through turn 1, but it didn't look like he was really racing too many other people. I think this yellow Civic was coming around to lap us all including that red Fiesta. I think that yellow Civic is actually a lap ahead, or obviously a couple of laps ahead of me, but probably at least a lap ahead of them as well. And for whatever reason, in the race, I just couldn't quite get down to the lap time I got in quali, which I always find weird. I mean, I understand in a 3-part weekend where you have qualifying race 1, race 2, it's quite likely that you might plateau off in race number 2, especially if you want to just secure a result. But for me, it was quite weird to have such a long qualifying session and having such a long race, both in pretty much the same conditions, to not have an improvement, but actually have a significant enough backstep. I think part of that was definitely down to the traffic and possibly just not being able to get the lap I wanted. But I think I was over a second slower in this race than I was in the entirety of qualifying, which I can't lie, that also probably got me down a little bit. I was like, how has this happened, Alex? How have you managed to go slower? But on reflection, watching this back now, I realise there are just so many little mistakes creeping in as I drive around this layout, so I'm sure there might be some criticism of the driving in the comments, and that is fully justified. I am not kidding myself here. It was not my finest display, but I think in the back of my head, the main thing I was thinking about throughout this whole race, which I guess isn't ideal, but it was what I was thinking, was just bring this car to the finish, Alex. You need to get a finish under your belt. It's a summer's day, just about, in August, and it's hot out there, so it was a tough one regardless of 40 minutes in a car like this. But bringing it home was a big enough achievement in itself for me this weekend, which I know sounds silly, but that's really what I was really aiming for. And I was happy when we did see the checkered flag to tick that one off the list. But you've seen throughout this lap I've had to let a number of cars go through, so I don't think really I was slower in terms of overall pace in the race. I guess I got unlucky in terms of being lapped throughout the majority of the race. There wasn't really a lap that went by without me getting lapped, and I guess it's just unlucky that where the overtakes, the lappery was taking place, I was getting time lost. But it is what it is. I'm not really too disappointed in it. As I said, the main objective from this whole weekend was getting to the finish after the tough weekend at Silverstone, and yeah, I'm thankful to say that did happen, but it wasn't without its dramas and its little situations going on throughout the race, which definitely got to me. Something I would like to mention is the Ford Ka itself. Now, of course, this car is designed to race in the Enduro Car Series, which has a fantastic grid. 45 cars are entering every single event, so very much like the Citroen C1 series as well. Massive grids, little cars, and I think a lot of entertainment because you're sharing between 3, 4, 5, maybe even more people depending on the length of the race. And I think, I've got to be honest, it's a fantastic idea for a series, and I've been lucky enough to speak to some of the competitors when doing a bit of filming work, and they've said that it's just such a great series to get loads of track time in for a small cost. Yeah, the entry fees are like £1,000, 1,200 or whatever for one of the shorter races, but one of the shorter races is like 4 or something hours. You're getting like an hour and a bit track time each, and that big entry fee is actually working out still much cheaper than it would be for pretty much any other race series out there in terms of cost per lap, if you'd like to put it like that. Or maybe not lap, because the KAs are quite slow, but cost per time out on track. You're learning a lot. And I think it's something I would say from the Cannibal videos as well, is that the KA is actually kind of a perfect car to use when learning to drive, because you're learning the tracks in slow motion in a way. It's understandable, some people want to go into a quick car straight away, have fun and blast around the track at 150 miles an hour, but there is a lot of fun in driving around a little bit slower, learning all the tracks, learning your trade, and then moving up maybe in a year or two. There's that checkered flag that I was certainly waiting for this weekend, but I guess I really want to just say, a great series idea here by MSVR, and I really do hope at some point, it doesn't look like it will be 2021, but I hope at some point in the future I get to race in the Enduro Car Series, because it looks like a lot of fun, and it looks like there's a lot of camaraderie within the paddock, and it's got a really good atmosphere, so I can't wait to give it a go at some point, whenever that may be. So that's this weekend over and done with. I think because of just the way my head was throughout this whole weekend, I didn't really feel like putting it into words after the race, but there were some stressful moments in there, being lapped all those occasions, and also the external cut-off switch having its little moment in the sun slightly got to me, but I'm happy that all that got resolved. We got out on track, we got however many laps on the board, and just had a really good time. Massive thank you to my dad and John, as always, who come to the events, and my mum and everyone at home that supports this, even obviously through the tougher moments like this was. And of course all the organisers and marshals and everyone at the track that maybe watched this race and was slightly laughing at the KA. Appreciate you coming along and enjoying it regardless. So there we are, another weekend chalked off. Yes, I've got to say that was probably the toughest one I'm going to have this year. Weirdly, even after the Silverstone dramas, this might have even been a bit tougher in a way, just because my head was probably not really in the right place. But we got through it. We got some more sort of signatures for the license, which is important, getting that rookie cross off, which is I guess the main thing by the end of 2021, and lots of little things learned, and we look forward to going into the next race week, which will be Silverstone in this car once again. It was initially going to be the Honda, but of course things change. Overall, some good lessons learned. Didn't quite go quicker in the race, but overall happy with the experience. Goodbye.